Good morning, everybody. That's the West Ham Network. Hope you're safe and well. It is Monday, start of another week. But obviously, because of the no international break, we've got a game on Sunday. We play some little mid-table side on Sunday. So, anyway, after every game, we do the breakdown where Statman Ben goes away, rewatches the game, pulls out all the key stats, and we go through it. We look at the stories, we look at the stats behind the stories, what we can learn. And in all honesty, as I said, it is very much a case of 2 points lost rather than 1 point gained, in my opinion. You know, I think, what was the thing that Martin sent me the other day? He sent me something to say that it was on, I think it was on Hammers Hub. Callum Wilson's the first player in the Premier League history to score 2+ goals in the first half, but failed to complete a single pass. Only at West Ham. Yes, anyway, regardless of that, it does sort of shade light on what is desperately needed for January. And obviously we keep an eye on the January transfer window, all the rumours. But let's get into it. And we start off looking at, as always, the 𝗓𝗡 results. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what 𝗓𝗡 is, it's an app which is, as the name suggests, it's about fans analysing the game. Let's put a bit of a better background. There we go. Analysing the game. And in essence, there's a bunch of us on the, it must be, I don't know, hundreds of West Ham fans on there. And even more, if you want to join, you can download the app. It's actually co-funded by Gary Neville and Michael McIntyre. But you can see here, and there's likes of myself, Stale, Anton, Gonzo, Dan, Jamie Talks, Brian, Gary Killington. There's loads of people on there. But in terms of giving us an idea of what people think in terms of the actual results. So in terms of the ratings out of 100, unsurprisingly, Alphonse Areola was man of the match, followed by Callum Wilson. Callum Marshall was even on the squad. Callum Wilson. Poor results, poor scores for Mats Kilman, who obviously gave away the penalty. And also Louis Guilherme as well, 49. Obviously, he was whipped off at half-time. From the bench, not real much impact. Fulkrug, 31. Tom Souček, 47. Kyle Walker-Peters just slightly ahead. Who's sort of playing now as like a left wing. And Nuno had got a rating of 46. I think it's fair to say when you looked at the substitutions, 2 points lost were due to Nuno tinkering rather than... Oh, is he gone? There we go. Rather to Nuno tinkering cost us those points, in all honesty. Now, let's look at the stats that Statman Ben has compiled. Let's add them. So we can see in terms of attacking an XG of 0.65. I think Bournemouth had like an XG of like 4. So I don't know. So how we managed to come out with a draw, I do not know. Big chances created, 3, obviously scored 2. Only 14% touches in the opposition box. 45% success rate. I think that's the lowest under Nuno we've had since. Decent shot conversion rate of 33%. Defensively, as we said, XGA of 4. That's mental. They had 29 of opponent shot creating actions. We've had 55 ball recoveries, tackles in the final for 5, and goalkeepers post-shot XG of almost 4. We got battered. We got battered by them, without a shadow of a doubt. When we look at the midfield, progressive passes, 7.9. Passing actually only 63%, very poor. Key passes, less than 1 interceptions. 1.5 turnovers, progressive carries only 18. It was very much was a backs to the wall job here. And actually looking at the attacking movement, for any of you who've been watching this the last few weeks, the left-hand side, you'd usually double that. It's usually about 40-odd%, but only 20%. I think part of that being, obviously, Louis Guilherme playing on that left-hand side, his first minutes under Nuno. In fact, his first team minutes since the end of September when he came on as a sub, I think, made a massive difference in terms of, usually we tend to be about 40%, about 30% through the middle, about 30% outright. It was almost a role reversal with the majority of our attacking movement down the right-hand side, which would have made sense with Wan-Bissaka and Jared Bowen, for example. But it was almost a graveyard down that left-hand side where usually it's so dominant. I think that was one of the key reasons why we looked so poor from an attacking perspective. So what does that tell us? That tells us that obviously clinical finishing masked our lower shot quality. So our XG was just 0.65. Yet we scored twice. So showing, obviously, Wilson's efficiency in terms of being clinical in goal rather than sustained attacking threat. And as you said, they were both of the goals were sort of out of nowhere, in all honesty. It really was quite a dominant side. I think it was about 70-odd% possession by the end in terms of Bournemouth. It was pretty dominant. And I think, in all honesty, I think we came away. I know it felt like we lost 2 points, and I'd said at the beginning, but Bournemouth were all over us, and to come away with a point, particularly with their XG being 4, just shows also not only that, but how good Areola was in goal. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Defensively overwhelmed, obviously an XGA expected goals against of 4 and 29 shots. Highlight how often West Ham's backline was breached. Reliance and transitions, only 15 ball carries in the opposition half, and a PPDA of 11.2 reflects a reactive counter-attacking approach rather than progressive pressing. Right-hand biasness, the data paints a picture of a disjointed attack that relied entirely on individual moments rather from Bowen and Wilson, while completely surrendering the left-hand side of the pitch, as we said, only 20% on that left-hand side, where it's usually double at least. And the goalkeeper kept us alive. He faced 3.9 PSXG, prevented multiple expected goals, underlining that the draw owed more to his saves than the team control at all. It was very much an individuals dragged us over the line rather than a team effort. And I think over the last couple of games, we've seen a team effort. We've seen a collective effort where, yes, there was very much backs to the wall and individual. And to be fair, if we're looking at it ultimately critically, that's very similar to under David Moyes, where there was a lot of individual brilliance, individual performances, which got games won rather than necessarily a collective team performance. So hopefully this is not a trend, and we can revert back to our last 2 home games where we've obviously won both of them in very decent form. Now, in terms of what we can do going forward, stop surrendering the midfield battle. I think particularly in the first 20 minutes, they were all over Potts and Fernandes until they sort of started to get hold of the game. Maybe invert a fullback to create a more box midfield with just 24% possession, 60% accuracy pass rate. West Ham's vacated midfield, invert maybe Wan-Bissaka next to the holding midfield to hold it, and have a sort of 3-2 build-up, giving central centre-backs short options and preventing the team from being pinned deep, sort of that inverted fullback, bring him in. And I think at times, sort of Wan-Bissaka was, but then by doing that, it's an option there. It's an option. Don't know how I feel about it, Ben, but that's but I know this, the midfield battle, I believe, and I think actually we could have done with, I think, the back 3/5. Doesn't think it leaves us exposed in that midfield. I think the back 4 means we can play sort of 4-3-2-1 or 4-2-3-1. It pads out that midfield a little bit more. But obviously injuries came in, and I think would it have been different if Somerville played instead of Guilherme? Quite possibly. Trigger the press on bad touches, not just deep areas. Implement trap zones basically on the flanks. So 15 opposition recoveries show passive play. We were letting Bournemouth advance 40-50 yards unchallenged rather than a full press that exposes their slow backline and sets triggers when the ball reaches the fullback near touchline and the winger and nearest 8 collapse aggressively onto it to force errors before they get through to the final third. And we did seem to give them a lot of ball with a lot of hanging back, and you could see it, particularly in the second half. And I think, and not putting excuses, but I think the weather made a massive difference. First half, Bournemouth could barely get out of their half when, in terms of kicking the ball long, where Areola was kicking it, almost their goal line, with the wind. Second half, they had the wind as well, and I think that made a difference as well. I think actually probably the wind flattered us in the first half, maybe, if we're looking at it super critically, in my humble opinion. Next one is fix the left side graveyard. 45% of the attack was down the right and 20% on the left. West Ham were predictable. Opponents triple teamed Bowen because Guilherme and Diouf posed little threat. Instructing the left back to overlap forces the defender to shift, creating the one-on-one space needs on the right. And I think that clearly is something we miss when we haven't got Somerville and Diouf playing together. It was a newish combination. A combination hasn't played together. Obviously, with Diouf being on international duty and Guilherme being at Rush Green, they haven't had times to do that, or we don't know in terms of when we thought Somerville was going to be injured. There's been no report really about time frame, but something needs to be done that left hand side for sure. Because Ben's right in the fact that it was all coming down the right hand side. So Irialo just basically flooded their left hand side, and that was any of our sort of relief from attacking perspective just got rid of, nullified. Pretty sharpish. Defend with the ball. The 3-pass rule after recovery. West Ham's 4.08 XGA stemmed from boomerang attacks where clearances came straight back, leaving the back line any respite at all. Enforce the rule after winning the ball. Complete 3 secure passes to reset the shape instead of panicking clearances. These defensive possession drains opponents' momentum. And there was a lot of panic, and you could see there was nervousness. And rightly so. Yes, we've been on the back of 2 wins, but this side are still bereft of any confidence under the initial half a dozen games under Graham Potter and last season as well. So for me, there was almost like a return back to factory settings, a little bit panicky. And that comes with confidence. And clearly, we were up against it. We were up against a very good Bournemouth side. And cut the supply to protect Areola. Block the zone 14, they called it, the cutback. Areola faced 3.9 PS XG as Bournemouth shot freely from central areas. The defence dropped too deep, leaving zone 14 basically the penalty area spot. When you divide all the pitch, zone 14 is basically the penalty area for cutbacks. Push the line up 5 yards to block passing lanes instead of reacting to shots. And that was the main issue. We did seem to be reactive rather than proactive in terms of our defence. But that all being said, a point was won. And as I said, although I believe 2 points lost due to those strange sort of substitutions, he does love a tinker, doesn't he, old Nuno? He does love a tinker. We, undefeated in the last 3. Is it 3? Yeah. And then we play Liverpool side who are bereft of any confidence themselves. They'll fancy us. They'll fancy playing us, to get back on track. But currently 11th, Varney slot, losing, quite comprehensively to Sean Dyche's side. You think, Nuno would take some heed on that and play a maybe more pragmatic style. I know it's at home, but to at least frustrate Liverpool. And then, hopefully we'll wait and see about any time frames with Jimmy Somerville. And obviously don't forget also, without that side, we didn't have Paqueta and we didn't have Somerville, 2 probably of our more effective players. And to come away with a draw isn't a bad result after all. And it might be a point that we will be very grateful of come the end of May. With Paqueta back in that side, then I would imagine we'd probably revert back to a back 4 at home. And then hopefully maybe Somerville's back. I don't know. I haven't heard any sort of timings on what went. I'm sure that will be a question asked in the press conference on Friday. But all in all, it's a point against a very good Bournemouth side. And at the moment, we need to take all the points we get. So anyway, take care. Stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith. Let me know in the comments what you think. Give it a hype. We've got the Academy show later on. Hype that one for sure. And I'll see you guys soon. Much love. Bye-bye. Peace out.